Have you heard of Skinner's rat experiment? In a famous study, psychologist Skinner demonstrated how rats, upon receiving a pleasure stimulus each time they pressed a lever, would become completely addicted to this reward cycle. They neglected food, water, even survival, becoming slaves to their desires, dying in pursuit of brief moments of pleasure. What if, in some way, we're not much different? Consider every notification on your phone, every impulse buy, every binge-watched series episode as little levers we press, seeking our next dose of immediate gratification. We are constantly stimulated, and like Skinner's rats, perhaps we are trapped in an invisible cycle of pleasure and distraction. Aldous Huxley, in his book Brave New World, depicted a society where control was maintained through pleasure. No need for chains or walls because people were kept under control by a culture of superficial distractions and rewards. They believed they were free, but in reality, they were imprisoned by an illusory freedom. Michel Foucault referred to this as biopower, a form of control that internalizes, becoming part of who we are, guiding us without our noticing. We think we're making free choices, when in reality, we're just reacting to stimuli designed to keep us content, and more importantly, distracted. But are we really any different? Are we, deep down, all just seeking immediate pleasure, pressing our own invisible levers, while ignoring what truly matters? Modern technology, with its endless promises of pleasure and gratification, has become the new form of control. We are more connected, yet simultaneously, more isolated and distracted than ever. Like the characters in Huxley's narrative, we are increasingly chained to comforts that paradoxically imprison us. And the real question we need to face is, are we willing to give up our superficial pleasures in exchange for more genuine freedom? When we envision a dystopian future, two visions almost immediately emerge. A society dominated by visible oppression, as in George Orwell's 1984, and another where submission is masked by a facade of pleasure and satisfaction, as in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Both authors painted grim pictures of social control, but they used markedly different strokes to highlight how such control could be exercised. In Orwell's world, control is brutal and direct. The Big Brother watches everyone and everything, ensuring obedience through fear, repression, and constant surveillance. Freedom is explicitly denied. The chains are visible, tangible. It's a world where people are kept submissive by the constant threat of punishment. On the other hand, Huxley presents a more subtle, yet equally effective control. In Brave New World, there's no need for brute force or oppressive surveillance. People are conditioned from birth to love their servitude, to incessantly seek pleasure, and to avoid any discomfort. The manipulation is so gentle that the very idea of freedom loses its meaning. There is no rebellion because there is no desire for something different. The prison is built with constant pleasures and distractions. Michel Foucault, a prominent 20th century philosopher, helps us understand this distinction further by discussing biopower. He describes how modern control doesn't need to be imposed by violence or force. It can be internalized by people themselves, through norms and practices that shape our behavior almost imperceptibly. It's a power that not only shapes what we do, but how we think and feel. And today, we live in a reality that blends elements of both these dystopias. While Orwell warned us about explicit surveillance and control, Huxley foresaw a world where control is exercised through distraction and pleasure. Consider social media, algorithms that know more about our desires than we do ourselves. We are encouraged to lose ourselves in a fog of instant gratification, constantly seeking the next like, the next purchase, the next episode. In this game of control, pleasure is the most powerful weapon. There's no need to force people to behave in certain ways when they are so busy seeking their own doses of pleasure. The question remains, are we aware of how these forces shape us? Or are we, like Huxley's characters, so enchanted by our freedom that we fail to see how limited we truly are? Have you ever found yourself checking your phone compulsively, even without a specific reason? Or buying something you didn't need just because it was on sale? It's almost as if we are all programmed to seek out small rewards, unable to resist the lure of immediate gratification. This isn't by accident. Decades ago, B.F. Skinner demonstrated how behavior could be shaped through a process called operant conditioning. In his experiments, rats were trained to press a lever in exchange for a reward, such as food. Over time, they became dependent on this reward cycle, ignoring everything around them. Today, we are the digital era's Skinner rats, conditioned to respond to carefully designed stimuli that keep us engaged. The phone vibrates, and we immediately feel the urge to check the notification. A flash sale pops up, and suddenly, we're buying something we didn't even know we wanted. And this behavior is reinforced constantly by small pleasures, doses of dopamine that keep us locked in a cycle of seeking gratification. Friedrich Nietzsche, meanwhile, warned about the danger of becoming happy slaves. For him, slave morality is that which teaches the oppressed to accept their condition as natural and desirable. In Brave New World, this idea is fully manifested. People are conditioned to love their chains, to find pleasure in their servitude, and to reject any impulse for change or rebellion. What makes this form of control so effective is that it doesn't require force or fear. It relies on pleasure. We're so accustomed to always seeking the next reward that we forget what it means to be truly free. Jean-Paul Sartre stated that we are condemned to be free, but paradoxically, many of us choose to use that freedom to imprison ourselves in cycles of pleasure and distraction. Perhaps true freedom is something more than just choosing between one gratification and another. Maybe it's the ability to question those choices, to reflect on what we really want and what really matters. Because in the end, who is truly in control? Us or the pleasures we incessantly seek? There's a subtle trap in the unrestrained pursuit of pleasure. Since the time of Epicurus, a Greek philosopher who lived over 2,000 years ago, the concept of pleasure has been questioned. Epicurus believed that true pleasure was not that which comes from limitless indulgences, but rather from a balanced life and moderate pleasures. He differentiated natural and necessary pleasures, such as friendship and reflection, from those that are vain and can lead to long-term suffering. However, we live in an era that seems to disregard this teaching. We are constantly encouraged to seek the next source of pleasure, the next object of desire, the next click, promising a moment of satisfaction. It's as if we're in a giant casino, gambling repeatedly, believing that the next round will finally bring lasting happiness. But, like a game of chance, each small victory only fuels the desire for the next, keeping us locked in an endless cycle of seeking something that never arrives. This obsession with immediate pleasure comes at a high price. When pleasure becomes an end in itself, we lose the ability to engage in critical reflection and deep engagement with the world around us. Modern society, with its constant barrage of stimuli, promotes a life of superficiality, where depth is sacrificed in the name of instant gratification. Aristotle, another Greek philosopher, said, "Excellence is a habit, not an act. How can we cultivate habits of excellence if we're always in search of the next dose of pleasure, distracted from any meaningful reflection?" The use of the drug soma in Brave New World is a clear example of how pleasure can be used as a tool for control. People not only accept their servitude, but desire it, escaping any form of pain or discomfort through chemically induced pleasure. The resulting complacency is one of the biggest dangers of this incessant pursuit of pleasure. When all we want is to feel good all the time, we lose our ability to think critically, to challenge the status quo, and to pursue a greater purpose. This pleasure trap isn't just a literary theme, it's a modern reality. We are constantly distracted not just by choice, but by design. The pursuit of pleasure has become a form of voluntary slavery, a cycle that binds us as much as any physical chain. And so, we ask ourselves, is true freedom not found in the ability to resist these impulses, to break free from distractions and seek something deeper? Perhaps by reflecting on this, we might begin to understand that the pursuit of pleasure can, in fact, be the biggest trap of all. How, then, can we resist this trap? The answer may lie in our ability to recognize these distractions for what they really are, ways to keep us comfortably imprisoned. To truly understand this, we need to examine how distraction has become the invisible prison of modernity, shaping our behaviors and limiting our perceptions of freedom. We are surrounded by distractions on all sides. Social media, streaming platforms, sensationalist news, all compete for our attention, seducing us with promises of entertainment and instant information. With every like received, every new series released, we are pulled into a whirlwind of stimuli that keeps us constantly engaged, but rarely satisfied. It's an endless cycle of seeking that prevents us from focusing on what truly matters. Jean-Paul Sartre, an existentialist philosopher, argued that bad faith is a state of self-deception where we deny our own freedom and responsibility. And that's exactly what happens when we let ourselves be carried away by these constant distractions. We are avoiding the freedom to choose to live consciously, preferring the path of least resistance, where we are passively swept along by a stream of distractions instead of choosing the course of our lives. In Brave New World, this idea is taken to the extreme. People are so immersed in distractions that they can't see the reality of their own condition. They are so entertained that they don't bother to question the system that keeps them in a state of perpetual complacency. This is frighteningly similar to how we live today. While we are distracted, we become blind to the larger issues that really matter. Who is in control, and where are we being led? This constant distraction is not just an obstacle to personal reflection, but an effective form of social control. Philosophy teaches us that true knowledge and freedom come from questioning, reflecting, and resisting conformism. But in a world where we are constantly bombarded by stimuli, it's easy to forget that we have the power to say no, to deliberately choose where we place our attention and energy. Socrates said that an unexamined life is not worth living. However, when we are continually distracted, we lose the ability to examine our own lives. The question we need to ask ourselves is, are we using our freedom to engage in an authentic life? Or are we simply escaping to the comfort of distractions? The answer to this question can determine whether we are truly free or just prisoners of an invisible prison. Upon reflecting on this, we realize that distractions are not just interruptions, they are barriers that prevent us from living full and meaningful lives. To understand how this conformity to comfort becomes so attractive, we need to examine how comfort becomes a form of control, smoothing the edges of rebellion and shaping behavior to accept, without questioning, the status quo. Conformism is a word loaded with implications, especially when we consider its impact on individual freedom. In the pursuit of comfort, we often sacrifice our ability to question, to challenge, and to resist. Political philosopher Hannah Arendt discussed the concept of the banality of evil, suggesting that evil does not need to be perpetrated by monsters, but by ordinary people who blindly follow rules and avoid questioning. And often, this evil is masked by an appearance of happiness and security. In Brave New World, evil is insidious because it is invisible. There's no need for violent repression when the system itself encourages conformism through pleasure and comfort. People don't question because there isn't enough discomfort to provoke questioning. They are encouraged to accept their condition with a smile, satisfied with their servitude because it is comfortable and convenient. Our modern world is not so different. We are encouraged to seek comfort in all things, from impulse shopping to incessant entertainment consumption. But is this relentless pursuit of comfort actually a form of control? A way to keep us complacent and conformist, accepting a life of superficialities and distractions in exchange for a false sense of security? Nietzsche warned about the dangers of becoming happy slaves, people who passively accept a life of conformism without ever questioning the status quo. For Nietzsche, true freedom can only be achieved through self-reflection, resistance to conformism, and the pursuit of a greater purpose. But this requires discomfort, the willingness to challenge ourselves and the world around us. By choosing comfort over freedom, we are relinquishing our own capacity to live authentically. We are becoming complacent, accepting a life of distraction and superficiality as the norm, and that is dangerous. Conformism is not just a passive response to the world, but an active choice to avoid the responsibility that comes with freedom. So, how can we break free from this trap of comfort? Perhaps the answer lies in a return to what is essential, in rediscovering the value of discomfort, doubt, and questioning. We need to be willing to face the discomfort of living fully and consciously. And this leads us to the final question. Are we ready to give up superficial comfort in pursuit of deeper, more authentic freedom? Are we prepared to face the challenges that come with this choice? These are questions that lead us to reflect on our own humanity. Are we willing to choose between comfortable servitude and challenging freedom? This choice is ours, and how we respond determines who we really are. Humanity. Choosing between servitude and freedom. We are now at a critical point of choice. We can continue to pursue superficial pleasures and accept the comfort offered to us, or we can opt for something deeper, more meaningful. Frederick Douglass, a former slave and abolitionist, warned that when a slave becomes a happy slave, he effectively renounces everything that makes him human. And in some ways, are we not doing the same? Surrendering our freedom for momentary comforts. The choice is profound because it touches the core of what it means to be human. For many philosophers, true freedom is not just about choosing between superficial options, but about living in accordance with our deepest values. This requires courage to question, to resist, and to challenge both ourselves and the world around us. It's a tough task, but it's the only way to ensure that we are living lives worth living. If we continue to distract ourselves with momentary pleasures and superficial comforts, we risk losing our humanity, our capacity to think critically, to feel deeply, and to live meaningfully. True freedom comes from committing to be true to ourselves and our values, even when that means facing discomfort or adversity. Are we prepared for this choice? Freedom requires responsibility and the willingness to face discomfort. It demands that we be willing to sacrifice immediate pleasure for the greater good of a meaningful life. And this is not something we can do lightly. Thus, we are left with a clear, yet difficult choice. Will we continue to conform, seeking comfort and superficial pleasure, or will we stand up to seek a life of true freedom and meaning? The decision is in our hands, and only we can decide which path to choose. As we reflect on this choice, we may realize that true freedom is not just about escaping servitude, but about embracing the challenge of living authentically. And this, perhaps, is the most important decision we can make in our lives. Remember, knowledge is the path to true freedom. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.